Roxanne Webster.
And I'm Keith Alba. And we are the partners and owners at My Home Team Denver.
And this is the Honest Hour.
That's right. The virtual edition.
Virtual edition brings us back to lockdown times.
Yeah, that's right. Good times back then, right? We all want to remember those.
Well, we're going to be doing an in-depth breakdown of the market and what this past year has held and what's coming in a few weeks once all of the year-end data comes in. But we wanted to talk a little bit about some kind of top level tonal and vibe predictions for 2026.
Right. We're going to break out the crystal ball and stare deep into that dome of
we'll stare deep into the dome. I love that.
Deep into that dome into that shiny dome and kind of give you our thoughts and I guess slight predictions for the Denver real estate market for the upcoming 2026 year.
And if you are excited to see our future predictions and all this other stuff, please hit the subscribe button and like this if you like it, and put a comment in and share it to everybody else, and we can continue growing this community. If I were to look back at last year, just the real estate transactions itself, I would call 2025 the year of the mechanicals. And let me explain what I mean by that. Way back 100 years ago, when I first got a real estate license, as Keith says it, my first contracts were written with a chisel and a tablet, right? But it used to be when you had a balanced market, real estate transactions took a little bit longer to close. And what would happen is when you sold your house, right? Houses are like anything else. All the systems within them, the mechanicals have life cycles, right? A furnace may last, 15 to 20 years. A roof may have a useful life of 12, 13 years. Hot water heater, 8 to 12 years, right? So when you go to sell that house, a buyer has a reasonable expectation that they're going to be buying a house where the mechanicals are operational and functional, that the heat turns on, that the water works, that the electric is safe, right? These are reasonable expectations for a buyer. And where that would naturally happen, I think of my own house where, the refrigerator, if the ice maker isn't working, I know to bang the side of it and boom, the ice maker starts working again. But so I may go for years without replacing or fixing that ice maker because I've been living in the house. But a buyer has reasonable expectations of habitability around major issues that get. So the reasonable time where that used to happen was at transfer. When somebody would sell the house, the buyer would say, hey, could you fix that furnace? It's at the end of its useful life. I know it's still heating the house, but it's on borrowed time. And that's when that would happen, right? What we've had in the real estate market really... Go ahead.
Because there was leverage at that time, right? The sellers wanted to sell. There wasn't multiple buyers lined up outside their front door. And it was really the sellers were in a position of, okay, I got to make this transaction work because ultimately I want to sell this house. And in doing so, I need to make sure that this buyer is happy and going to pay me the money that we agreed to. And so there was that leverage that the buyers had at that time that you're talking about.
That's exactly it, right? And as a result, then, every time a house would sell, very seldom did you have, if you think of the major systems, electrical, plumbing, roof, foundation, what am I missing? HVAC, and then environmental issues, right? Most of the time at that point, a seller had the expectation that they were going to need to address probably one of those things, right? And but then we've had, since the Great Recession, during the Great Recession itself, we had 40% of the sales were distress sales. They were foreclosures or short sales, where none of these things were done. Those were all as-is sales.
The sellers didn't have the means to do it, right? The foreclosure means the bank had got it. The bank's not going to put that kind of capital into a property. They're just going to sell it for whatever you're willing to pay for it, buyer, but don't expect me to do anything. And in a short sale type of a situation, right? The buyer is saying, I can't pay the mortgage anymore. I can't pay you the difference. I know I signed a loan for, 300,000 and I'm only selling and my proceeds are 250. I don't have the means to come up with that $50,000 difference, and let alone, the capital it would take to replace the furnace or put a new roof on or something along those lines. And so at that time, it was just truly an as-is sale. Like
an as-is sale. So you had that whole generation of house sales were done without any mechanicals being addressed, right? And since then, we've had the hottest sellers market I've ever seen, really, since the Great Recession, until just the past 2 years.
The leverage completely flipped to the seller side, right? Now the seller's like, you don't want this house because of the furnace? I got 6 buyers lined up outside my front door that are willing to take it with this one. So buyer, you can either take it or move along and I'll sell it to the next person that's there. So now that leverage had gone to the sell side, versus where previously the buyers had the thing is like, hey, I'm not going to buy this house for the money we agreed on with this work that's associated with it. And now sellers are saying, hey, take the works or
so
move
if we
on.
Look at 2008 to 2025, that isn't 20 years, but it's pushing in on it, right? And if the average house sale is every 5 years, we're looking at almost 4 full generations of house sales without any mechanicals being addressed. Right? And as a result, in 2025, I know with all of my transactions, it wasn't just one mechanical that the buyers were demanding being addressed, right? Because it wasn't just one mechanical system that was in distress or close to or at the end of its useful life. We were looking at 3 or 4 or 5 or all of them, right? I don't think I had a single deal last year where there wasn't a sewer line repair or replacement involved. And that's a big dollar item, plus a furnace replaced, plus a roof. Right? So it was not unusual at all for that inspection to come back. And after the buyer and seller have negotiated in good faith, that buyer comes back and says, oh, by the way, I need this $40,000 in repairs done for me to continue with this purchase. Right?
And sellers left with the choice of, do I do it? Do I, take it out of the proceeds that I was expecting? Or do I wait to see what somebody else has done? But guess what? Now they have knowledge of an adverse material fact that they're going to have to disclose to the next buyer. And in this market, the next buyers are highly likely to get compensated somehow. If the seller wasn't going to put the money into it and do the roof and the furnace and the sewer line, then the next buyer would be expecting that taken off of the price tag. So they weren't going to just take it with those warts not being addressed somehow. Right?
And I think that when we look at somebody who, if somebody bought, say, before 2020, right? Or, 2020, 2021, and has realized, even if the values have eased back a little bit, the appreciation gains that people made during the early 2020s were profound, right? Huge gains in value. And guess what? You got the advantage of all of that appreciation. You just need to put in your mental Rolodex that we are not in that market anymore. And that market was unhealthy in a lot of ways, right? So you have realized those huge appreciation gains. Just trim it back by 40 or 50,000, or for the love of God, just go fix all of these mechanicals yourself. Right? Yeah. If you've got something that's close to the end of useful life, and you've got you know that your kid is just starting high school, and you may be looking at moving in 3 to 5 years, start chipping through these things and upgrading those systems. If you want us to come over and give you an idea of what those would be, that way when you go to sell this house, the mechanicals are as beautiful as your kitchen is, and that's going to make it a more valuable asset, and somebody's more willing to give you top dollar for it.
Right. Okay. So the 2025 was the year of the mechanicals.
Guess what? 2026 is going to be another year of the mechanicals.
Just a continuation. And I agree. Right. And what we saw in 2025 is, as I refer to them, the belle of the balls, the most beautiful houses, the ones that have been updated, not just cosmetically, but also the guts and those components, are the ones that were flying off of the market. right? Those are the ones that got offers early, got offers quickly, assuming they were priced appropriately. But the belle of the balls were the story of 2025, and I think that's going to be similar for 2026. The caveat that I would put on that is I think it's going to be highly interest rate dependent. Right?
Yeah.
There is a massive housing shortage still, right? These builders can't put up the houses quick enough in order to close the gap of, the housing that is needed. They're trying, but they're also concerned about, the state of the market and how quickly that inventory is going to move and whatnot for them. So they're not rushing to get that gap closed because the interest rates currently are such that buyers are kind of dragging their feet a little bit.
Yeah. Buyers were really skittish last year, right?
Yeah. And more of the same to come.
I agree.
Right? Because everybody, the experts that I'm looking at are predicting that interest rates are going to be pretty similar, right?
They may ease back a little bit.
We've talked about interest rates before, that, the Fed fund rate, what we hear Powell talking about, and the drop of the Fed funds interest rate is indirectly tied to mortgages. It's more about interest rates seem to follow the 10-year treasury a little bit more closely, right? And so when you're talking about investor money, they've got options in where they want to put those funds, right? And in order for them to want to place their funds into the 10-year treasury, which would then eventually bring down those yields, or into mortgage-backed securities, there needs to be some security for them, right? If the risk is higher, they're going to demand a bigger return for that investment of their dollars, right? They're taking more risks, and the offset to that is they're going to make more money on the risk that they put out there. And so what really the underlying is talking about there is the state of the economy. What is it that these investors with the money are predicting for the state of the economy? If people start losing their jobs a lot more frequently, and we see the unemployment rates starting to spike, right? That's not going to be good for those investor dollars. They're going to be scared, right? If people don't have a job, they have no income, they can't make their mortgage payments, they're not going to put their money into a risky scenario like that for a 5% return.
That's
You're
right.
gonna want something more in the sixes, and that seems to be kind of where we've settled in a little bit, just slightly above 6. Some people are predicting maybe towards the end of next year, 2026, that we might see that drop below the 6% level. And I think once we start seeing a 5 in the first position, the first digit of those interest rates, that is likely going to, knock some of these buyers off of the fence and say, okay, 6 was too much, but 5, I can kind of handle that. And
I think that may also knock some of the sellers off the fence who are kind of landlocked into these low interest rates they got in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I think people are starting to realize those interest rates aren't coming back.
Yeah.
And the reality of the situation is they're going to have to accept a higher interest rate than that 3.5% or 4% that they got previously.
That's right.
So they're becoming more accustomed to that. So we will start seeing some of those sellers that have, been dealing with the house, I guess the best way to put it. They've been tolerating the house. They would like to get something different. Maybe it's, empty nesters that want to downsize, or a family is expanding and could use some extra space, but they haven't been willing to pay those extra costs up to this point. But I think they're starting to get, especially if we get into the 5s, the pain of staying put is going to be more painful than the thought of paying a 5% interest rate.
Yeah.
And so we'll start seeing that activity moving. So I think 2026 is going to be the year of the mechanicals continued, and a heavy watch on the interest rates.
That's right.
But as a buyer, if you're in this market right now, you've got that leverage that we were talking about. You've got the ability to push for, price reductions and negotiations up front, or massive seller concessions where you're getting funds from the seller to buy down that interest rate temporarily, or pay for your closing costs and things along those lines. As soon as mass buyers start hitting the market, that leverage that you have now is going to start eroding, right?
That's
Because
right.
there may be more buyers lined up at that front door, and the seller's going to say, yeah, I know this is an old furnace, but you can either take it, buyer, because I've already given you a lot of money off of the price, or I'm going to move on and take it to the next buyer that's willing to pay me.
So, that's such a great point. There are a lot of folks in my database, people who I've sold multiple houses to, that literally when they raised their hand in 2022 and said, hey, we got another kid on the way, we need a bigger house. I said to them, frankly, you do not have, with love and affection, I don't think you have the temperament for this market, right? People who are cautious and in a good way, careful with their money, live within their means, right? And the idea of them going into a purchase where they were, if they wanted to be even get to the table and be competitive with the other 19 offers, they had to be willing to offer $100,000 cash above the list price, waive their appraisal and restrict or waive their inspection. And I'd say finish out your garage, or your kids are young, they can have a bunk bed. You don't have the temperament for that market. Those
Right.
very same cautious people are people who may be skittish, right? With because your character doesn't change that much. You're still cautious, you're still careful, but guess what? This is the market for you.
That's
It
right.
is the market for you.
The conversations back in the 22 era and in and around that is, as real estate agents, we were saying, I'm going to tell you what you have to do to be a buyer in this market. It's not what I think you should do.
That's right.
Right? Because of what you talked about, the waiving of a lot of that stuff, maybe getting underwater initially, was what was required in order to get the seller to turn their head your direction.
That's right.
And maybe not the most sound advice to say this is what you should do. It's
right.
like this is what you have to do, and so that's gone. But, and so those nervous buyers are the ones that maybe fiscally wise is the way of saying it, are now in a position where they don't have to do those things. They don't have to waive those protections. And they currently have that leverage in the negotiation side of the world. And if they start coming out.
There's a way I think about it sometimes, right? Wants versus needs, right? When you are engaged in that type of negotiation as a buyer with the seller, right? You need a house that's in good condition. The mechanicals are good. The cost of money is higher. You're not going to have a lot of disposable income to be fixing up those things yourself. So you as a buyer have needs regarding that transaction, right? And that seller may have just wants, right? They may want X number of dollars, or they may not have a need to move, right? So there are going to be some sellers who, and it's fully their right, say, no, I'm not willing to do these things, go to ground and wait for a different market. So it is possible that for those buyers, if you kind of tighten your belt and know that there may be a higher failure rate over on these transactions if you run into a seller who just isn't willing to do those things. But there are plenty who are willing to do those things because they have to move, and this is what it takes, and they've got the equity to do it. There are going to be some sellers who bought in the past 3 years with low down payments with government programs who just aren't going to have the money to do those mechanicals, and that may not be the house for you either. But the houses are out there. There are houses with enough equity and where the seller has got the motivation that if they want to sell that house, they're going to have to deliver something that's in good condition to you, that's got good bones. That's what we want.
Yep, I agree. I think there may be some great deals that come on the market for those sellers that, like you were saying, the low down payments and those sorts of things, and may be able to swoop in and get some stuff. But in that situation, right, there's probably likely not funds to address those things, the major issues like the roof or the HVAC. But that compensation is going to come somewhere else, maybe in the price or something along those lines.
Guess what? Sounds to me like you need a good agent for those things.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody that's paying attention to these things, or can find kind of do the the investigation in terms of, okay, where is this seller, right? How long have they lived in the house? We can look to see the last time they refinanced, or is it their original loan that they have on there? How long has that loan been in place, right? So we can figure out a little bit in terms of their equity positions and be able to advise our buyer clients, hey, we have some opportunity here to maybe get some of that equity, or this guy's going to be tight, and our reality is going to be strictly, our negotiation is only going to be in the pricing side of it. But
that's right.
There's opportunities if you hire the right agent and work with the right people that understand how to do a little bit more than just put information into a contract.
Yeah, excellent. Well, reminder, hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell, ding, and share it, comment, like it, or don't like it. And Happy New Year.
Yes, right. Happy New Year, everyone. You'll be seeing more of us on these things. So definitely, like Rox said, hit that subscribe notification, because we'll be putting on a lot of this content all year of 26.